everyone and welcome to my channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Elizabeth and this is Awaken Spirit. Today's video is going to be all about working with crystals, from selecting a crystal all the way through to cleansing your crystal. So let's get straight into it. So the first point I want to cover is choosing a crystal. Now, choosing your crystal can be a very personal thing, or it can be something that you're doing for a specific reason. So first of all, one of the most typical ways people tend to choose crystals, especially in the beginning, is looking up the properties of the crystal or what a crystal is good for working with, and then selecting a crystal based on that. Now, this is a really great way to start working with them if you haven't worked with crystals before. But my suggestion is to also trust your intuition. So if you can go to an actual physical store, it's even better, because then you get the opportunity to touch the crystals, to feel their energy and see if there's something that you're particularly drawn to. A lot of people feel like they can't choose a crystal just because it looks pretty. But that's not the case. If there is a reason why you're seeing a crystal and you think, oh my God, that's a really beautiful crystal, or you just like the look of it, the shape of it, whatever it might be, then that generally means that there is something with that crystal that you actually want to work with. The other thing you can do as well is go for a walk through the store, and just see if anything picks up. If there's any energy that you pick up. For example, I did this when I went in for no specific reason to pick up a crystal at all, and I kept getting this feeling when I kept walking past a cabinet that was like this tingling sensation. So eventually I gave in and had a look in the cabinet and realized that there was actually a particular crystal that I was drawn to. And this was actually moldavite, and this is one of my most favorite crystals to work with, and since having that crystal, I can understand the reason why I was drawn to it, because there's certain things that were happening in my world at that point in time that crystal actually represented. So don't be surprised if you walk into a store and you find those kind of physical reactions happening within your body as well, because this is your intuition and also the energy of the crystal that is coming through as well. Now, for those who can't go into a physical store, that's okay. When you're looking online, you're going to get similar kind of reactions as well. So make sure you spend some time going through the pages upon pages of some places, looking at each individual crystal, seeing the colors, the designs, all of this kind of stuff that's going to call you. So then you can pick it based on that. Now, I want to also point out too that if you do get drawn to a particular crystal, let's say you've gone in there looking for some healing and you've looked up all your crystals and you have all of these ideas of what this particular crystal is that you want to use, but then suddenly you get there and you're drawn to a completely different crystal. And a lot of stores or online places will have a physical description of the crystal, and will say what its properties are. And it may not actually mention healing in there, but that's okay. Even if the specific properties aren't listed for what you're looking for, if your intuition is drawing you to a particular crystal, it means that it's still going to help you in some way, shape or form with that aspect. So don't feel like you have to be restricted to the definitions that you find. Trust your intuition, because it's ultimately your relationship with the crystal that's going to mean the most. So the next point I want to go over is the types of crystals that you can select. So there is a whole range of crystals that you can get, from rough crystals all the way through to clusters and wands and this kind of thing. So when you're selecting a type of crystal, first of all, as I said, use what your intuition is calling you to, because a particular crystal is going to have slightly different energies for its purpose. So for example, if you're using a rough crystal, which the term rough crystal means that it's in its raw form, so it's like the big chunks that don't look as shiny and pretty. They're, you know, rough edges. They can be small, they can be large. They just don't look as shiny and well put together. But because this is a rough crystal or a raw crystal in its form, you're going to have a stronger connection to its actual energy because it hasn't been handled as much, as opposed to a tumbled crystal, which is what we would see as a stereotypical crystal sold in a store. They're like the small ones that you can fit into jewelry, into your pocket, that kind of thing. So they're called a tumbled crystal. They're going to look more aesthetically pleasing a lot of the time, if you like things that are nice and shiny. But they're going to have same properties, but not quite as intense as what you would get from a raw crystal. Then you can move into the avenues of crystal wands, which are generally a long shape of the crystal, in literally the shape of a wand. They can be small, they can be large. These are specifically used for purposes. It could be that you're using that wand to direct energy and cleanse other crystals or cleanse spaces. For example, I use a selenite wand and I use that to activate crystal grids and also cleanse my body as well. There's then also crystal points, and these again are usually standing up. So for example, like this would be a crystal point. So they are the crystal that is shaped into a particular point, and that is going to direct the energy out of the crystal. So where the point is generally where the energy is going to be directed out. Now this doesn't mean that if you're wanting to use a tumbled crystal, for example, because you don't have access to a point, it doesn't mean you're still not going to get the same kind of purposes. They just direct energy a little bit differently and they have a different feel to them. And obviously there's the aesthetic aspect too. Then you can then move into clusters. Now clusters are, I should have done this for all of them and showed you some examples. So clusters are going to look like this if it's going to, there we go. So your cluster is going to be one of the most popular ways a lot of people like to buy them. It's in its raw form, obviously, like it's just been taken out of the ground as a big chunk. And these are going to have a higher aspect of energy as well. Just quickly so you can see. So this is a raw crystal in its raw form. This is lepidolite. I can't even say it. Lepidolite, there we go. And this is it in its raw form. So you can see it's just kind of like not as shiny, not as pretty. It's just like a rock, essentially, as my husband would say, a fancy rock, as opposed to a tumbled crystal, which is going to look like this. And then we have a crystal wand, which is going to look like that. This is, or a crystal, this can also be called a crystal point. It's depending on what you're working with. This is my Lemurian seed quartz, and you may also get crystal ones that look like this. So this is my selenite wand that I use. So you can see it's just shaped in a rounded edge on each side. So so these are just a few of the different types of crystals that you can get. And as I said with everything else, use your intuition when purchasing these, because it's going to come down to what you're most drawn to. And also pricing as well. So depending on the type of crystal, obviously, because there's rare crystals, there's more popular crystals, but also when you're going into clusters and wands and crystal points, you're going to get a higher price point. So this may factor into what it is that you're choosing to do as well, but also listen to that intuition, because your intuition is going to tell you what your best purpose is. And which crystals are the best to use. You can also do your research in terms of what it is that you want to actually use the crystal for. For example, if you're wanting to create a crystal grid, you might actually use a lot more smaller points. That way they can direct energy. If you're wanting to work with the energy of a room, you might use a cluster because it's a higher concentrated energy. So yeah, really look at the purpose that you're actually looking to work with the crystal when choosing the type of crystal that you're wanting to go with as well. So this moves into the next aspect, which is uses and what you can actually use your crystal for. So there are many different things that you can do with your crystals, from wearing it as jewelry all the way through to working with them in the room. So for example, I always have a crystal point of some sort on my necklace, or I use a crystal cage if I don't want to use one that's already set in jewelry. I often have crystal bracelets as well. These are because this is the kind of energy that I'm wanting to work with on my physical body, and within my life on a day-to-day basis. You can do, for example, like what I've got here, have crystals on display around the home, which is going to generate energy and affect the energy within the home as well. You can also do, for example, crystal elixirs. I do want to put a caveat in here. When doing this, really make sure that you are researching your crystal, because not all crystals are safe to use in this way, especially if you are planning on consuming the liquid. If you're planning on just using it, it could be just to energetically charge the water within the room, a little bit different. But if you plan on consuming the liquid, make sure you do your research, because not all crystals are safe to consume. Once they've been in water, there are some that are quite toxic. So before you do this, really do make sure you're doing your research. And I would always suggest using a tumbled stone if you're making your own, as opposed to a raw stone. So what I mean with this is, creating elixirs, is actually infusing water with your crystal. Now you can actually buy crystal drink bottles these days. I can show you one. So this is a crystal bottle. This is citrine that is in here. So it's actually a crystal point that is touching the water. There is different types of crystal bottles that you can get where they have crystal chips down in the bottom part, or in like a tumbler as well. Again, choose what you're most drawn to. If this is the avenue you want to go down, I like the aesthetic aspect of this and the nice big chunk. Hence why I use these. I have a citrine and I have a rose quartz. What I would suggest is, if you are purchasing something like that, do your research as well, because you're going to get some from price points that are hundreds of dollars through to cheaper price points. So do your research when looking at that as well. Don't just go jumping in straight away to buy something. Make sure you do your research and make sure that they're using crystals, again, that are safe to work with. You can do this at home. So you can infuse your own drink bottle by using tumbled crystals. You can do it if you've got a water jug, you can infuse the crystals as well. So the purpose of a crystal elixir, which is one of my favorite ways to work with crystals, is you are using the energetic vibration of the crystal and the intent, and you are partaking in that into your body, and it's affecting your body on a subtle energy. Now, working with crystals as well, another thing I want to just quickly say is, don't expect a magic pill. I mean, this is the same with anything, especially when working with natural products. Don't expect a magic pill. If you're feeling like you're not having those kind of results that you expect, like let's say you're hoping this like miraculous, it could be citrine, working with citrine for abundance, for example, and motivation, and you might find, hey, I've been working with it for a week and I don't have lots of money coming in. Crystals work on a very subtle energy, and I can do a separate video on this, on talking about how crystals actually work from a scientific point of view as well as a spiritual point of view as well. But this is really something that you need to understand it's going to work in a more gradual way, in a more subtle way in your world as well. So other than working with them from elixir point of views, you can also work with them in meditation to enhance a particular aspect. If you're, say, trying to meditate for abundance, if you're trying to meditate for healing, all of this kind of stuff. So whatever you're specifically doing, you can use a specific crystal to work with as well. You can do this through amplifying energy as well, so wearing them on your body, sleeping with them, adding them to spells as well. There's a whole different array of things that you can use them with amplifying energy. You can also use them for protection. For example, I like to use clear quartz as protection around the home. I like to bury them at the four corners of the home and add one within the roughly the center of the home as well, to do an energetic protection as well within the crystal energy. So really it just depends. I mean, the sky is the limit when working with crystals. But these are just some of the key aspects that people do, which is using them for amplifying energy, manifestation and healing, and that elixir energy as well. So this moves into the next point, which is activating or programming your crystal. Now, this is a term that may confuse people a little bit. The crystals themselves obviously already have their metaphysical properties and their energies, so they're naturally going to be working that way. But if you are wanting to work with the crystal for a specific purpose, for example, you could be working with rose quartz and you're wanting to bring in more healing and self-love. So working with that crystal to activate it and program it is going to be highly beneficial. So what this means is you could be holding the crystal, you can have your hands energetically over the top of the crystal, whatever works for you. Finding your way with working with these crystals and how you activate is going to be a personal thing. For myself personally, I like to hold the crystals, and it's about visualizing or stating your intent for what the purpose of the crystal is. So this could be through holding onto it and visualizing healing, or holding onto it and stating that this crystal is being used for healing. And this way you are putting your intent and your intention into the crystal itself to activate it and to program it for your individual purposes. So this then moves into working with them. This kind of connects to the uses as well, but I wanted to go just a little bit deeper into how you can work with crystals. So obviously wearing them on your body in terms of jewelry, or as a loose crystal within your pockets in a crystal cage, is one of the key ways people do tend to work with them. You can also add them, as I mentioned before, into locations within the home if you're specifically trying to draw energy within there. But another really powerful way, obviously, aside from elixirs, is working with them from crystal grids. Now, crystal grids are either something that you can create yourself, or you can purchase a specific grid. They can come on anything from metal, cloth, wood. They come in so many different shapes and sizes and patterns, so it really depends on what it is that you're trying to do. You don't even have to create a crystal grid on something. You can just geometrically create it out on any kind of surface. For myself, I use specific wooden boards for the crystal grids, and what crystal grids are arranging your crystals in a particular geometric shape. It could be multiple crystals, it could be one particular crystal, to amplify and direct energy for a specific purpose. I can do a separate video on this as well, of going deeper into working with crystal grids, because I do feel like it does deserve its own video. But they are a very powerful way to work with energy, and once a crystal grid is set, it does its own thing. So they can be set from anywhere from a day through to a year, depending on what it is that you're trying to create. So crystal grids, a very, very powerful thing to work with. So finally, this brings us into cleansing your crystals, and this is a very important aspect of working with the crystals. There is certain crystals that you can get away without doing this. For example, citrine is something that you don't need to cleanse. I still like to work with cleansing the energies because I feel like that's just part of my practice, but there is certain crystals that don't necessarily need to be cleansed. However, a good rule of thumb is working with cleansing anyway, just so that way, especially if you've been programming your crystals as well, so it clears the intent from the last programming to working with it at a new stage. So cleansing you can do in many different ways. I like to think of this as working with the elements. So with cleansing you can use fire, water, earth or air, depending on your crystal. For example, there's certain crystals that can't be put into water because they will dissolve, and selenite is one of those crystals. If you work with it with water, it's eventually going to disintegrate. So making sure you do a little bit of research on the actual properties of the crystal as well. This is a really good practice to get into when you're looking up crystals anyway, doing the research from a metaphysical point of view or an occult point of view through to the scientific aspect as well, and understanding the makeup of a crystal is a really great way to build a relationship with it, and also to understand what it is that you're working with. So with cleansing, depending on the crystal that you're working with, is going to depend on how you do it, and then also it's going to depend on what feels most comfortable for you. For example, I rarely cleanse any of my crystals with water. I don't know why. This has just never been something that I've been drawn to do. I always cleanse my crystals with air or incense. So I will always run them through incense when I'm cleansing them. That's just my personal way of doing things and my quirk. So working with the incense aspect is going to cleanse them. That can be anywhere from smudging with sage through to burning an incense stick and just running the crystal through the incense until you feel comfortable with it being cleansed. Running water or cleansing in water, obviously a very simple thing. A lot of people tend to do that. That seems to be one of the most popular ways of cleansing a crystal. Fire is also really great as well. So with working with fire, you can just use a candle and pass the crystal through the flame. Obviously safety first, don't burn yourself, but running the crystal very quickly through the flame is going to cleanse it with the fire energy. And finally, you can work with the element of earth, and depending on your purpose, you may have a specific, you might use a pot or a container of some sort that has got soil that you specifically use. You might put it outside on the earth. A lot of people tend to bury it in the ground a little bit to cleanse it, so that way it's encompassed in that earth energy, or just placing it on the earth or placing it on a container of soil. It could also be sand. I mean, you get the idea. It's working with that earth element. So this is a great way to also cleanse them. I want to also quickly talk about charging a crystal as well. So this is different to programming and activating a crystal. Charging a crystal is it's amplifying its energy, it's building its energy up. In some ways it kind of correlates with cleansing as well, because it does clear the energies and amplify the energies. Most people are going to know the whole put your crystals out on the full moon to charge your crystals. So this is the most popular way of doing it. I am very bad at doing that. The likelihood of me actually getting my crystals out to charge is very slim. I tend to have windows open where I am anyway, so the energy is going to come through, but the likelihood of me charging a crystal is next to none. I'm a lazy witch, so it's not necessary to do it. A lot of people panic and they say, oh my god, it's the full moon and I haven't got all my crystals out yet. Don't stress, it's not going to be the end of the world. Your crystals are still going to work perfectly fine. This just activates them in a different way. Now you can also use the sun to charge your crystals as well. A word of caution with that one, there is particular crystals that aren't going to do overly that great in the sun. It's not going to damage them per se, but it may make them fade in their energy. For example, I have a amethyst tea light candle that's got amethyst chips. I've had it for years. It was in direct sun for quite a while, and the amethyst colours, the purple in it has actually faded, so it looks more like a clear quartz now. It doesn't interfere with the energy of the crystal, it just doesn't look as nice. So make sure you just do a little bit of research too when working with the sun, or if you are working with the sun, not leaving them out too long in the sun. So the same concept can be seen with charging in the sun compared to charging with the moon. But then also you want to take into consideration maybe the energies that you're trying to work with as well. For example, the moon is that night energy, the yin energy, calming energy. So if you're trying to work with that inner work and inner emotional stuff, it's going to be really great to work with the moon energy as opposed to the sun, which is that vibrance, that joy, that motivation. So working with that energy may be something as well. So it's remembering however you work with your crystals is going to depend on the external factors as well, what your purposes are, the use that you're actually doing, the way you're working with them, the way you're activating them and charging as well. So looking at all aspects when working with them is going to be a holistic approach to working with them. And finally, I just wanted to say too that kind of coming back to my point of don't expect this big bang energy of working with a crystal. That's not to say that it can't happen. It may be something that the energy is amplified the second that you work with it. So don't think that you can't have a amazing experience with the crystal, but it's respecting that they are a very subtle energy with working with that complement the energies already in your world. And it's that intent of working with them that's the most beneficial. So I hope this has given you a little bit of food for thought with working with your crystals, maybe clarified things a little bit for you. As I said, I can go deeper into certain aspects of working with crystals, from crystal grids to the ways in which crystals actually work as well. If there is particular crystals that you would like to know more about, please let me know in the comments down below, and I can do individual videos on those specific crystals. Or it could be not necessarily a particular crystal, it could be wanting to work with, say, crystals for manifesting, or crystals for love, or crystals for whatever it might be, in a specific purpose, and I can go into more detail on specific crystals and how I would work with them in that aspect as well. So thank you so much for watching, everyone. I'm sending you all lots of love. Take care.